So we begin in time. Uh, Diving straight into the problem. Today, I think data has become very important. Somebody had said that data is the new oil. So, in fact, I had written an article which said data is the inflammable oil, because more than an asset, data is becoming a liability. So, and there are regulations everywhere. So, HIPAA is there, California Consumer Protection Act is there, PCI DSS is there. So, depending on the sector you are, you have more and more regulation. GDPR is there. India is coming up with PDPR. And you all, you know, are handling a plethora of technologies, right from cloud to Kubernetes to, hyper-converged infrastructures. It must be really a nightmare. And I didn't say ransomware. So I would like you to, first of all, introduce yourselves, and then, we can have your thoughts on how are you managing this fear. And we can begin with Make My Trip, and we would like to know from you as to how do you manage this data life cycle, because you are dealing with huge amount of data, and not only personally identifiable information, you are dealing with metadata, and you are dealing with it in real time. So how do you handle it? So once you complete your introduction and your this thing, then we can proceed to the next person. Yeah, please.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
You can introduce yourselves.
Yeah. I'm Sharlik. So they have introduced quickly. Piyush, I am heading the data platform engineering for Make My Trip. Have been in especially interesting story, right? So was heading security earlier at Make My Trip as well, information security. So how that journey translated into big data is something which sir touched upon, right? Which is data is humongous now, and my journey is I could relate to each what he said, right? It's no longer like managing one database or set of databases or tables, etc. You are managing data lakes, right? So and the definition of lake is again ambiguous, and especially so in our context, right? So where there are many consumers who are interacting and transacting on your platform, plus there are many in the ecosystem you have suppliers also, and these suppliers are not just from India, right? So because you have inventory from outside India as well, and you have good challenges talking to working not just in terms of APIs, but so you are storing essentially each and everything, right? In the name of logs, right? Everybody does it, right? And it's no longer a SIM as a solution, and which is only restricted to the kind of firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, and rest of the appliances which you put in your racks to other things to collect your logs. You have huge amount of instrumentation done across each and every microservices you write, right? Be it your Android app, which is generating crash logs to everything, right? So you have, so I just wanted to call data, even an error message which you print is data, right? So or can be classified as some amount of data itself, and hence the challenge within the industry is huge, right? And especially related to the data life cycle, right? So a typical construct is so there is a producer and a consumer, right? So a producer produces that data, that can be any application for that matter, and there are many consumers who are consuming that, and figuring out, okay, what my consumer has consumed, and now knowing, okay, what copies they have created, and further so the lineage part of it. But again, lineage is again abused in my understanding, right? It is restricted to only jobs, right? When people do a ETL, they say, okay, here are my jobs and here is my lineage. But under the transformation job or any job which a developer is writing, it is up to him how he is writing and where he is further storing those logs, etc. And that creates a problem related to knowing what all copies have been created and the metadata which exists, etc. And it's really complex to truly be able to, as an organization or as a leader within the organization, you will be able to just pinpoint, okay, this is how my information flow or data flow is. And here are my copies, and here is what I have shared, like my copies with my third parties for this purpose and that purpose, etc. It's not like in the regulatory world, right? So you don't need to just mention, okay, this is the information I'm sharing with my third party. You need to also classify why you have shared that information, what purpose you have shared, and what that third party is doing with your data. And that's a black box in more or less, right? So in the cloud infrastructure interconnected world, and in the name of SaaS, right, what these companies do, uh, right, with whatever interactions you are making, right, to either simplify or your life or your software's life or anything. And hence the challenge, right? So, and as an organization, we are trying to tackle to some of that by building some of the tools internally, because some of the out of the box API solution, etc., only work with the tools, technologies which are well known within the ecosystem. But internally, as I said, you are writing your software to support these transactional platforms, etc. You know your software better. You know what instrumentation you have done, what schema you have created for inputting or outputting that data onto. And hence become cataloging and metadata becomes essential to manage the governance part of it as well. So that so you know which traces, or which trails you have across the board, not just for the consumer data, but to the overall.
I have a related small question, which I would want you to answer. Is that the government of India came up with this data empowerment and protection architecture, wherein they are talking of a sort of a encrypted, pipeline where the information user and the consumer would be able to interact. So, in fact, the RBI came up with this framework of account aggregator, NBFC AA, wherein all this data would be with a third party in an encrypted form, where this party would be blind to this data, and the granular consent architecture would be built into the API, with which, let us say, you want to share your information with your insurance agent, you want to share your date of birth for next 3 months, and you can build in such a granular consent structure. So, do you think, is there a movement towards this?
No, absolutely. Data sharing is a key problem, right? So not just with the third parties, I'm saying, right? So you are signing up for getting some services, like just take an example of, right, so email delivery as well, right? What my concern is, right, so in the name of, they will say, okay, we are just a pass-through, which is like saying, okay, I will just, you call this API with this data, and I am just going to deliver this email into the mailbox, that's it. But right, the concern here is that delivery part of it is not vetted, right? You don't know what copies, what logs, what error messages, what it is printing, etc. Still a challenge. Coming back to, right, so the government initiative primarily, right? So in terms of consumer would have the more control in terms of defining, okay, I'm sharing this information to a neutral party, which is then sharing it to the service providers primarily, right? So would be really helpful. The key challenge which I would love to understand there is, for example, in the name of personalization or training machine learning models, etc., where that thing is going to reside onto. Or are we going to just say, okay, there is no personalization world or there is no recommendation world. It is going to just reside with some government initiated neutral party, and then, and that there are pros and cons to both of both the spaces primarily. Yeah.
Kiran, you are from the insurance sector, so the kind of critical data that must be with you would be huge. And the way today everything is cloud first, how do you handle cloud security?
Oh, thanks, Brijesh, for that. So hi, first of all, I'm Kiran Bilsekar from Aegon Life. I'm the CISO and also take care of the IT governance perspective. And also we have seen, coming to your question, Brijesh, on the cloud perspective. So I think being an insurer, it's not an exciting business in itself. We tried a couple of years back, started a cloud journey where we looked at the opportunity in the startup fintech a couple of years back, where we today see 100 plus unicorns. So we wanted to look out that as an opportunity, as a channel of business. And when we were speaking to a lot of fintechs, we identified we were not able to match up to their taste, their model perspective. That's where we decided to be a cloud native, digital native organization perspective, and the journey started around it. And now, if you ask me, we are one of the preferred choice of an insurer perspective when it comes to any kind of an integration with the fintech, because they have realized in terms of the mindset what we carry, the kind of integrations what we carry, the kind of tech stacks what we carry is something which is very much identical for them. That was from a digital or a cloud adoption perspective. Coming to a cloud security, when we started the journey, gradually, over a period of time, we have now very much matured in the journey. But when we started, it was like the cloud security was not something which was like earlier we had an on-prem data center where we used to have fortified our data center with a firewall perspective. Here on the cloud, each and every workload is actually a perimeter in itself. So you need to have a different level of protection. The traditional security is not going to work out in the cloud environment. That was one of the primary learnings which we identified. And if you look at on top of it, there were business challenges. Business wants to get an idea live in 30 days. They're talking about. Another challenge was 80% of the code which we were using was actually reused or copied from the internet. There was hardly anything which the customized code which used to prepare. And on top of it altogether, we had the security challenges where we were seeing around the kind of web application attacks which were happening around it. And that's the overall challenges, and which we started that the cloud security needs to be differently managed out. So we need to look out a cloud native security perspective. So that's where we looked out the offerings of the cloud service providers, and also we looked at some third party solutions which can get integrated and can give us a better visibility and management of the cloud perspective. So we invested in the cloud native solutions like the cloud posture management, which gives in terms of real-time compliance check, and also a regulatory or a kind of a standards checks from an ISO and other aspects standards perspective. So that was one aspect. The other was on the cloud workload protections. And now, as I was talking about cloud workload, every workload is like a perimeter in itself. Whether you talk about the virtual machines where we started the journey with, then it comes to the containers or the serverless functions perspective. All these technologies are completely different, and you need to look out for putting a security out early in the life cycle to ensure that it's not a bolt over approach perspective. So that's where, and on top of it, it also needs to be a developer friendly as well from a developer first perspective. That's what the approach what we carry internally out over there. So these were the couple of solutions which really helped in terms of shifting the security to the left. This also reminded me of an analogy which I have heard in the AWS reInvent, where AWS CISO talked about is you should not look out, or if you look at an analogy of your car airbags, we don't want a car airbag to get deployed after the accident. We need car airbags to be deployed at the time of the accidents. So should be our security in the cloud security perspective, because the scale of, if you look at the scale of events which are coming in from the cloud perspective, all these workloads which are coming out, it is not possible a human analyst, a security analyst or an operations center which can handle it manually perspective. You need to have an automation in place, auto remediations in place. So that's where we need to have a security like an airbags if you are deploying the cloud environment.
Wonderful. Abhishek, Dream 11 has literally grown exponentially, and the kind of different workloads you must be having when matches are on, when they are not on, and the different kind of architectures you must be dealing with. How do you handle all this security at this large scale in real time?
Hey, hey everyone. This is Abhishek from Dream 11. I handle security and the compliance part with data and privacy. And it's a very pertinent question, right? Because I mean, the kind of scale that we see during the matches, right? It's it's insane. And I completely agree with Piyush and what Kiran has suggested, that security needs to be a first-class citizen, right? There is no doubt about that. The companies who are not understanding or have failed to cope up with that would suffer, because security is something that everybody with data and everything, I think that Brijesh sir has put in perspective. This is the new oil, right? And everybody is after your data, correct? And this thing. So we have also taken this initiative to put security and shift left kind of strategy, where right from the conceptualization of any new feature or any new idea that you're going to generate with, your security needs to be associated with that right from the day one when you're talking about that. That's how we think about the security. And then as firstly, you have to carve out your data flow. And then accordingly, you have to see what are the security parameters, as Kiran was talking about. What are the security aspects that you have to take care of, and what are the things that can go wrong, right? It's also very important to do a risk analysis of what can actually get wrong, and get it everything in perspective to see at scale, right? Because the data is humongous, and whether I was talking to Brijesh, whether it's unit data or petabytes of data, even more than that, right? You have to be, your paradigm and your standard cannot get any lower. So that is one thing. Secondly, we invest a lot. We have been a cloud native company right from the very beginning. And that's why we are deploying all the cloud native platform solutions right from the very beginning. You have to leverage that, leverage the automation, because humanly it's not possible to take care of the security at this scale. So automating wherever you can, right? Because the way the machine learnings and the models, AI models have evolved all through these years, they're very fantastic, right? Once you deploy it and once you start trusting the machines, I think they give you fantastic results. And then you can actually focus on those areas which actually require much more attention, like anomaly detection, like making fraud prevention more secure, understanding the whole pattern in which the security gaps can be compromised on. So these are the things wherein at scale you have to be focusing more, right? Some of the things which are there available as a platform, you always have to judge what is build versus buy, right? And as far as the data is concerned, right, what we have done is we have started to create and have an ecosystem of data which is much more inside. I mean, we are taking care of the data as if the whole data parameter should be as much as into our control. That's very important to understand, because all the compliance and the risk profiling that we do, we have to be in control of our data, right? And the way we share our data, right? Also that's also something you should always be thinking from the view that whether it's in the periphery of the compliance and everything. So that's how we see at our scale with terms of performance and compliance of the data.
Digressing from here, in fact, when I met Neeraj, I was very happy because 20 years back, we used to wait for SUSE Linux, which used to come out with PC Quest magazine. And it was very plug and play and very hardware compliant. And when I asked him today, what does the company do? So he told me about Kubernetes and how they have taken a lead in management of these infras. Now, if we think cloud and virtualization is new, this is the next level stuff. Now you have, so many Dockers, containers, pods talking to each other, doing what, I don't know. How do you handle this? How do you handle security for this?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's the new wave that we are seeing. I think technology always has seen many waves, and now customers are moving away from virtualization and slowly getting into containerization. So that wave is on, and that's where the whole concept of container security comes into play. We provide solutions around container security, and what we see is some of the earlier speakers also mentioned the life cycle of that modernized application or a new application or a new feature that you're building, right from the stage it's on the drawing board to when you start, building that application. So when you are building an application, you have to do build scans. When you are doing testing, you have to do things like registry scans. Then you move into a staging area where multiple developers are having their sprints, and all those get consolidated. So when you're at a staging stage, you have to do CIS benchmarks, and then you get into production. So at production, then you need real-time security. You need to have a layer 7 visibility and real-time security again. So when you pass through that entire life cycle, I think managing security at each stage becomes critical. So that's something that we specialize in. Especially when it comes to payment gateways, when it comes to a BFSI segment, there are various standards related to security which have to be adhered to, and we provide solutions around that. Apart from this, the whole concept of security as a code, obviously it's been there for a while, and making that a little more user friendly, as he said, developer friendly is very crucial because it cannot spoil the agility of that project. So the moment you identify a vulnerability, the ability to convert that into a policy, convert that into a piece of security code, and then pumping that code across Amazon, Azure, Google, maybe some edge device that is lying, maybe on-prem, maybe something that you've hosted at a data center. So having that security policy being applied across all these locations at the click, I think these are things that are the new expectations that are coming up from many of our customers, and we see that as a prime requirement. Last but not the least, I think security automation, I think, has been there for a while, but now with containers and VMs coexisting in an environment, it requires a very different level of sophistication. So these are some of the things that we essentially see. Yeah.
Excellent insights. I really liked your analogy of the airbag. It's really wonderful. It's the right amount of security when it is required, and excellent insights on data lifecycle, classification, and managing of these very new infrastructures, and also of scale as to how to manage such security at such scale when there are billions of transactions happening. The regulatory environment is getting tightened. In fact, CERT India has now come up with compulsory reporting guidelines that within 6 hours you have to report. Similarly, in other regulated industries, SEBI has been coming up with guidelines. RBI has a data security and cyber security framework. So we see that we also feel that PDPR, which is equivalent of GDPR, will probably come in the next session of the parliament. So somewhere privacy is becoming important, data security is becoming important. Ransomware incidents are increasing world over, and we've seen that the last year was dominated by very large ransomware incidents. In all this light, I would like, 2 sentences take home for our audience from each of you as to what should they, as enterprises, as individuals, do to ensure that data is secure.
So I'll go first. So primarily, I would say have the overall visibility of your tech environment, which is one of the most important aspects. Because if you're not having that, maybe a small event or an incident could result into a breach perspective. So I think one of the most important aspects is have a right visibility of the entire environment. As I spoken, developer first approach, try to shift your security, embed it into your entire SDLC lifecycle. I think these are the 2 things which I would say which will strengthen the organizational processes.
So, especially related to PDPR or even any of the other compliances as well, right? So, most of the incidents which happen because of misconfigurations, right? And it is, and no matter what policies you apply, you keep on coming up with new policies, etc. But at the end of the day, if you debug and do any RCA, etc., you would figure out, oh, that CrowdStrike agent was not there, or this, that, and all, whatever, right? And the point which Kiran was making in, right? So you need to know each and every bit and traces of your infrastructure piece, etc. is very valid to know what configurations you deploy into, what configurations you apply to the right softwares. It is in the name of IAM roles, you are not protected, I'm just saying, right? So, and hence, and people leaving traces even in GitHub accounts, committing codes and so many things. So, and those are the human, I would not call it human errors. These are misconfigurations which from the enterprise perspective, if I need to call it, which lead to those things. Blaming to a developer who has committed something else is the wrong thing. Secondly, right, so I still see, and like if there are some startups who you consult and work with as well, right? So there is no mindset of like, for them, right, storing any information which is coming in from get put APIs and putting it directly into the database in plain text to everything. There is no classification per se of PII, SPI, etc. Right? So please be mindful of those classification, metadata, etc. And as Kiran said, right, it has to be built into the SDLC, developer first, so that like these are the things which you need to educate to each and every employee. It cannot be just restricted to the security team of any organization itself, no longer. You can have center of excellence with the specialist itself, but like the education has to be imparted to each and every member across the board.
So I completely agree. So I will not repeat, because I completely agree with the points that visibility and shift left, developer friendly, all those things are very important, right? And as in terms of misconfigurations and all that. So extending that, I will just like to add that zero trust policy should be outside in and inside out, both, right? And that's where I think what Piyush is trying to make this a point, that there will be people who might do mistakes, right? And mostly it has been found that it has been a human link that has been the weakest, right? So basically with zero trust policy, if you have a better in terms of mandates and standards of committing something like in GitHub, of something that by mistake also you cannot commit a misconfiguration, right? And probably this is a preventive measure, but equally important is the detective and auditing it, right? So you have to have a good audit mechanism, because you shouldn't trust whatever has been already deployed cannot be breached or cannot be broken, right? So you always need to have an audit, which is a continuous process, which comes up with a zero trust policy, that I do not believe this and I might break into this, right? So from both of the angles, if you see, I think what the regulations and all that probably would be much more ready with, right?
Yeah, I think if I summarize these 3 points, that's precisely the core topic, which is how do you ensure supply chain security and runtime security, and the working together between these 2 layers. I think that's most crucial in the new world, number 1. Number 2, being an open source 28-year-old German company, I think we've had the opportunity to work with many customers. In India, we are luckily to be part of a billion transaction platform with some of the largest customers. And one of the things that we see in this is real-time security as well as supply chain security. I think both play a crucial role in this whole aspect. And zero trust, I think that's something that you have to focus on as you are developing new applications or modernizing some of the old applications. Yeah. So that's basically where I would summarize it. Yeah.
Cybersecurity is becoming a geopolitical issue, and the kind of adversaries, right from nation states to organized cybercrime groups, they are getting more and more sophisticated. There is a full cybercrime ecosystem in the dark web where you can purchase services, where you can, rent out people, purchase malware, get custom malware developed, and they all are after your data. So primarily, the target is your data. And somewhere we'll have to develop also policy frameworks to share, threat intelligence the without the fear of your reputation being tarnished. So you should have uh, some kind of a mechanism where industry can share real threat intelligence. Also, I feel that industry should go ahead and invest in innovation, because cybersecurity is expensive. It's very, very expensive. And somewhere we'll have to lower these costs by prospective investment, where industry can get together and they can invest in a way where we can, share so-called these dragon's teeth, so that our industry gets protected. Um, Similarly, you see, regulations are going to be more tight, and it's a more tight space, wherein, as all of us are agreeing, that security is shifting left. So security can't be an afterthought. It has to be built in into each processes, be it secure coding, or be it configurations, or be it your policy. Security has to be everywhere. One question, we have time for one question. We can take one question. You have to tell whom the question is for, and then we end. Thank you.
So how would you determine the safety of data when using blockchain? So one of the themes of the summit is Web3, right? So the integration of blockchain into our lives. How would you say the integration of this technology would benefit or harm our storage, transfer, usage, etc. of data?
You are talking of security application of blockchain.
Yes.
No comments on. My one take would be like, so first the adoption part of it, right? So which use case we are talking about? If, for example, we are talking about fintech, then the similar things which apply to any piece of software would apply to blockchain as well, right? In terms of governance, risk, compliance, the same GRC framework has to be bought to whatever tech stack, a newer tech stack or newer stuff which applies. And the principles which we were discussing, be it zero trust, etc., would remain same. Tomorrow, if there is a new tech stack, I don't think like the basic fundamental principles are going to be any different from what we are discussing on in the panel.
I'll just add upon that. If you see, I'm not sure, because largely there is a discussion which is happening on the India data management framework, which is happening. This is largely for any kind of a data which is required from the government agency's perspective. So as Piyush was talking about, the data management framework is very important in terms of how you're handling the data, how you're integrating it out, because this is currently we are in an API economy. So everyone is a consumer and a producer of some or the other types of services. So this data management framework is going to play a very important role. Obviously, blockchain is also going to be part of a subset of it. So we have to see much more how does the development happens in that data management framework perspective.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your wonderful insights.
Yes, just one last question. Yes.
Yeah. Just one question. I think this current government, if you foresee and if you see the entire landscape, the way it is moving is under digitalization. In fact, on 15th August, we would be soon having 75 DBUs inaugurated by the PM. That means it is reaching the rural area. That's the focus. Now, we all know, sitting over here, we are talking about cyber security, we are talking about data. Now, see, it's going to reach the rural as well. So my question is related now, since we're going to reach to those rural areas, untouched points, and where data is now the new thing, it's like securing it. So do you foresee that any governance body, like you mentioned about A, so for that we have Sehmati, who is actually the governance body taking care of all the A's and the TSP, where they're laying down the rules, and Ribbit as well. So do you foresee
I'm not very clear on the role of Sehmati, because it's a private body, and I have no idea as to what they are doing in that space.
No, I do have fair amount, because we are getting registered also because our company is going through and getting soon the registered member of Sehmati. So anyone and anything has to do with TSP and AN, you need to be the first registered member of Sehmati. That's the role.
Is there a legal requirement to that?
Yes, yes. In fact, you also have an amount associated to it to become the member as well.
No, it's a private organization.
But
is Rebit saying, is RBI saying,
Yeah.
is RBI recognizing Sehmati? Because
yes,
I don't see any document by them.
It seems to be the whatever we have shortlisted, and now we are also going to be soon the member. But my question is, do you foresee like a centralized body? Now the government also has to get into the role of this data security and cyber, where all the institutes, companies govern into the data standards. There has to be some data standards on the data security and data sharing as well. Do you foresee anything coming up soon? Because now it's going to reach the rural, untouched portion as well. So now we are playing with the data across. It's going to be a disruption soon. Where do you foresee?
Question is for whom?
It's an open question, sir.
Again, I would love to understand, especially the question part of it. When you said so it is reaching to the rural part of it, right? Which you are concerned about the data. My take would be the data would not be different from different from the data which you are currently collecting in these applications, which in tier 1 and tier 2 cities. So
yeah.
I would love to understand the question part of it.
So see,
first.
it's going to be DBU units. That means it's going to be digital products and services. So they are making it more to the rural area. So that means now the data security, also there's a more concern. I understand well, there's no categorization of rural data and urban data, but you see the way the banking systems also will be moving. So my question is, do you foresee, or do we should have a centralized government where it is controlling the data security, data sharing? Because we do not have that standard.
Not everything can be left to the government agencies or government bodies to take care of it. Certain things has to be self-compliance as well, right? I'm sure not everything which Kiran does in his organization is defined by government bodies or in the name of compliance. Certain things are done as a self-compliance as well. But broader framework has to be defined and agreed upon with industry plus the government bodies as well. And my assumption, and I'm no authority when I'm saying that, my assumption would be in terms of, right, so for example, if they are reaching out to rural to do any digitization bit of it, they will apply the same principles and fundamentals there as well, right? But the concern is, are they going to be compliance, or is there going to be a compliance which is enforced with some penalties, etc.? Yet to see, and probably Brijesh sir can comment better on the policy side of it.
You know, Niti Aayog held a series of deliberations. In fact, the Chris Gopal Krishnan committee also came up with a report. And this whole data empowerment and protection architecture is a good framework, I think, going further. So I don't know about what bodies would basically render this, but I feel that there have been extensive deliberations and interactions with the industry as well, and the reports are available for review. You may check them, and it's a movement in the right direction.